Welcome to the Brockton Public Schools Policy Manual Review Subcommittee meeting. We are at the George Romm Little Theater tonight at Brockton High School. And we have with us tonight our committee members, Tim Sullivan and Kathy Ehlers. Ehlers is right? Yep. Okay. Kathy Ehlers from Ward 1 and Tim Sullivan from Ward 7 and Judy Sullivan from Ward 5. And I'd like to establish a quorum. Tim Sullivan.
Here.
Kathy
Here.
Ehlers. And me, I'm the chair, I'm here. So I would like to introduce Alyssa Haggerty from our department that's working on our policy manual. And we're going to go over some sections G and H and 2 new policies on B.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I'll give you a brief update on the work that we've done so far and where we are at this point. So as you noted, tonight we'll be working on sections G and H, and we have 2 revisions to policies that were already presented in section B. That means that up until tonight, we've already completed section A, Foundations and Basic Commitments, section B, Board Governance and Regulations, section C, General School Administration, section D, Finance, section E, Support Services, and section F, Facilities, and lastly, section L, Agency Relations. Those sections have all been completely revised and approved by your school committee. They've been updated on your website, and they are 100% in the green light. At this point, we have sections G and H to present tonight, and that will then leave us with 3 remaining sections. Section I, which at this point is with legal review, section K, which is also with legal review, and section J, which I am wrapping up my revisions on now, and I anticipate will be with legal most likely by the end of this week. So we are in the home stretch with your school committee policy update, and I will get straight to it. So why don't we start with the 2 small updates that were made to section B. The first was to section policy BDB, school committee officers. The legal department has requested that we add the vice chair's responsibilities to chair subcommittees, which is the current practice. No other changes were made.
Alyssa.
Oh, I apologize. There is a page 2. They also suggested deleting the last note, which follows the legal reference MGL 7136, which also pertains to the treasurer of the school committee.
So
One question, Alyssa.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have this vice chair here tonight. Didn't you say the vice chair has to be at all subcommittee meetings?
I did not say that, no.
What did you say? I thought you said that.
So what I said was that the legal department has added the vice chair's responsibilities to chair subcommittees into this policy. Would you like me to read it, the section that's been added?
No, I'm just wondering, are we in the wrong by not having her here now? She's not here.
The chair, the ones that's a committee of the whole.
Correct.
The committee of the whole, Tim.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
So
she
that would
said
be
subcommittees.
finance. This isn't committee of the whole, though.
So this policy is about school committee officers.
So maybe we should have in there, Alyssa, committees of the whole,
Okay.
subcommittee. We should probably add that, then that would differentiate between committees of the whole and this subcommittee is not the committee of the whole. Yeah, I think maybe for future, we might have to define that deeper.
So the language that was added reads, "The vice chair of the committee will act in the absence of the chair as presiding officer of the committee and will perform such duties as may be delegated or assigned to them." So the request is to add the vice chair of the school committee as opposed to policy committee, correct?
Yeah, there is no vice chair of a policy
Okay.
committee. There's only of the school committee.
And I think the last line of that is very important. I think that's what Tim's referring to, where it says.
Yes, that's what we need to add.
Yeah, the vice chair shall chair all subcommittee meetings, which basically means that the vice chair would have to be present at all subcommittee meetings.
Right.
Or am I reading that wrong?
And I don't think that's what it's meant to say.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what it's meant to say. We just have to get clarification from maybe the lawyers,
Okay.
what's that's meant to say. Do you know, Melinda, or?
To me, I would assume that it would be subcommittees of the whole,
That's what I thought. Yep.
where the vice chair would, where the chair would sub it.
Yeah.
And in the event that the chair is not there, the vice chair would then, and that's just subcommittees of the whole. That would be like the finance.
Policy.
Policy, yep.
There are a few, that's the, it is the committee of the whole. Therefore, the vice chair, if the chair is not there, the vice chair would have to chair that committee. But for subcommittees, committee members are appointed to chair those committees. But like you said, I would probably check for legal, just
I
to
would,
make sure.
yeah. I would definitely check.
And that note did come from legal, so they would certainly know what they meant to say. So we'll check with them, we'll send that one back and we'll get clarification.
These little subcommittees have their own chairs.
Right.
They might not realize that, you know? But if we're gonna completely change it, I think we have to have it worded correctly in there. Yeah.
So the next policy that legal added a note to after we adopted it was section BEDC quorum.
Can I go back 1 second? I'm sorry about the treasurer piece. Do we have to decide on that? Because there's a question at the top where it basically says who's going to be the treasurer, how do we want the treasurer to act? So it looks like there's some outstanding questions. Are those questions we should be discussing now, or do we want to bring those to the committee of the whole?
That's up to you.
That's what I'm saying, but if you look at the legalese on the next page, it says, I would delete this, I do not believe this committee has a treasurer. Is that okay that we do not have a treasurer? Or are we supposed to have a treasurer and we have not assigned one yet? Because some treasurers are, you know, the city treasurer, we can just say that's the person that's going to be our treasurer, or we assign one within our group. I'm just wondering which, because it gives us 3 options on the top. Outstanding
We're not
questions.
required, just regional school districts are required to appoint a treasurer. It says that below. So we don't have to and we never have. So that's just if we do have a treasurer, then this language applies to that.
I don't think that's right, Judy, to be honest with you, because at the top it says, however, on a local level, this policy is missing some information. See green section, second paragraph at the bottom.
It doesn't
And
say that. I don't see
on the
that.
top, right underneath school committee officers. And then it says outstanding questions. Number 1, is the school committee treasurer elected from school committee membership? Number 2, if not, is the treasurer elected? And then 3, if not 1 or 2, does the city treasurer serve
see
as the
that.
school committee? So I'm wondering if this is an open question that we need to answer.
So those were my questions that I had sent to legal.
Okay.
And so her response was in that second page where she says, I would delete this. I do not believe that the committee has a treasurer. So she was saying just omit it entirely.
Okay, we don't have to
Okay.
worry about it.
That's correct.
Perfect, okay, thank you.
The second policy in section B is BEDC quorum. And the paragraph in question is the second paragraph, which is titled Subcommittees of the School Committee. The revision includes the language, membership of school committee subcommittees is limited to no more than 4 members. A quorum for the subcommittee meetings is a simple majority of the members. That section previously stated that 3 people are needed for a quorum of a subcommittee. Instead, the legal department has advised that the language should read a simple majority.
Makes sense.
So we'll move on now to section G, which is titled Personnel. And I'll just start by saying most of the policies in Section G, and primarily all of the policies in Section H that we'll go over tonight were last updated by Brockton Public Schools in 2002. You've got a few in there that were 2004, 2011, but most of these other sections we've seen were more recently updated, but these two in particular are pretty far outdated. Starting with Section G personnel, the first policy is GA personnel goals. This is a MASC policy that was updated to reflect its most recent version. Not a lot of changes. As you can see, there were just a few small language changes. And the policy now reads, the district-specific personnel goals are, 1, to develop and implement those strategies and procedures for personnel recruitment, screening, and selection that will result in the employment and retention of individuals with the highest capabilities, strongest commitment to quality education, and greatest probability of effectively implementing the district's learning program. To develop a general staff assignment strategy that will continue to the learning program and use it as the primary basis for determining staff assignments. Number 3, to provide positive programs of staff development that contribute both to improvement of the learning program and to each staff member's career development aspirations. Number 4, to provide for a genuine team approach to education. And number 5, to develop and use for personal evaluation positive processes that contribute to the improvement of both staff capabilities and the learning program.
Sounds good.
One question, Alyssa.
Sure.
On item 1, you said district learning program, and here it says system.
So the original language was system, and you'll notice throughout the policy manual, MASC has stopped using the term system, and they now primarily use the word district in its place.
Okay.
Next is GBA, Equal Employment Opportunity. Again, this is an MASC policy. It was last updated by MASC in 2018, so you can see there's some changes to language here. The policy now reads, the school committee subscribes to the fullest extent to the principle of the dignity of all people and of their labors, and will take action to ensure that any individual within the district who is responsible for hiring and/or personnel supervision understands that applicants are employed, assigned, and promoted without regard to their race, color, religion, national origin, sex, gender, identity or expression, sexual orientation, age, genetic information, ancestry, military status, disability, pregnancy, or pregnancy-related condition. Every available opportunity will be taken in order to assure that each applicant for a position is selected on the basis of qualifications, merit, and ability.
Looks good.
Next, we have policy GBAA, sexual harassment-staff. This is a Brockton's public schools specific policy. We've actually already adopted a policy related to sexual harassment in Section A, which is policy ACAB. There were some changes to our policy in the spring that simultaneously were taking place as MASC was making changes to their policy manual. So I have included that reference in your notes. However, I would recommend removing this policy to avoid having duplicate policies in both Section G and Section A. And we can then at that point take a second look at ACAB and make sure that we are up to date with the most recent changes.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. Next, we have GBAA-E, personnel. Again, this is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. The recommendation is to omit. This policy is in conjunction with the prior policy, so they kind of both go hand in hand.
Gotcha.
Next, we have GBD, School Committee-Staff Communications. This is also a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. This policy was already revised under Section B, Board Governance and Regulations. It was policy BFC, School Committee-Staff Communications. MASC classifies this policy under Section B and not Section G. We've seen that quite a few times throughout the policy book at large. like I said, many of these policies date back to 2002, and MASC has done a number of updates and reclassifications since that time.
Let's hope so. Makes sense.
Okay. GBEA, staff ethics / conflict of interest. This is an MASC policy. It's been updated to reflect its most recent version. The new policy reads, the school committee expects members of its professional staff to be familiar with the code of ethics that applies to their profession and to adhere to it in their relationships with students, parents, and guardians, co-workers, and officials of the school district. No employee of the committee will engage in or have a financial interest in, directly or indirectly, any activity that conflicts or raises a reasonable question of conflict with the employee's duties and responsibilities in the school district. Nor will any staff member engage in any type of private business during school time or on school property. Employees will not engage in work of any type where information concerning customer, client, or employer originates from any information available to them through school sources. Moreover, as there should be no conflict of interest in the supervision and evaluation of employees, at no time may any administrator responsible for the supervision and/or evaluation of an employee be directly related to them. And the next two paragraphs are new. They read, every 2 years, all current employees, including school committee members, must complete the State Ethics Commission's online training. New employees must complete this training within 30 days of beginning employment and every 2 years thereafter. Upon completing the program, employees should print out the completion certificate and keep a copy for themselves. Employees will be required to provide a copy of the completion certificate to the municipal or district clerk through the superintendent's office. In order to avoid the appearance of any possible conflict, it is the policy of the school committee that when an immediate family member, as defined in the conflict of interest statute, of a school committee member or district administrator is to be hired into or promoted within the school district, the superintendent shall file public notice with the school committee and the municipal or district clerk at least 2 weeks prior to executing the hiring in accordance with the law. And the Mass General Law is noted at the bottom.
Makes sense.
Next, we have policy GBEAA, Criminal Offender Record Information, or CORI. We have 2 CORI policies in place that we've already approved that are uniform with MASC policies. They're policy ADDA and ADDA-R. They've been updated to reflect the most recent MASC policy relative to CORI and background checks, and they are in compliance with Mass General Law. So my recommendation would be to omit this policy altogether to avoid confusion.
Agreed.
Next, we have GBEBC, gifts to and solicitations by staff. This is a MASC policy. It's been updated to reflect its most recent version. There were quite a bit of changes. The original policy was much shorter. They've kind of added quite a bit of detail. Would you like me to read the new policy?
Yeah, I think because there's so many updates, I think we should.
Okay. It starts with the acceptance of gifts worth $50 or more by school personnel in a calendar year when the gift is given because of the position they hold or because of some action the recipient could take or has taken in his or her public role violates the conflict of interest law. Acceptance of gifts worth less than $50, while not prohibited by the conflict of interest law, may require a written public disclosure to be made. In keeping with this policy, no employee of the school district will accept a gift worth $50 or more that is given because of the employee's public position or anything that the employee could do or has done in his or her public position. Gifts worth less than $50 may be accepted, but a written disclosure to the employee's appointing authority must be made if the gift and the circumstances in which it was given could cause a reasonable person to think that the employee could be improperly influenced. The value of personal gifts accepted is aggregated over a calendar year. So 4 gifts of $20 value, is the same as 1 gift of an $80 value if given in the same calendar year. In general, homemade gifts without retail value are permissible because a reasonable person would not expect an employee would be unduly show favor to the giver, so no disclosure is required. Such gifts could include homemade food items, cookies, candies, etc., hand-picked flowers, and homemade gifts worth less than $10. Class gifts. There is a specific exception to the prohibition against accepting gifts worth $50 or more when the teacher knows only that the gift is from the class, not from specific donors. A single class gift per calendar year valued up to $150, or several class gifts in a single year with a total value of up to $150 from parents or guardians and students in a class may be accepted provided the gift is identified only as being from the class and the names of the givers and the amounts given are not identified to the recipient. The recipient may not accept an individual gift from someone who contributed to the class gift. It is the responsibility of the employee to confirm that the individual offering such gift did not contribute to the class gift. Gifts for school use. Gifts given to a teacher solely for classroom use or to purchase classroom supplies are not considered gifts to an individual employee and are not subject to the $50 limit. However, an employee who accepts such gifts must keep receipts documenting that money or gift cards were used for classroom supplies. Solicitations. In spirit, the school committee supports the many worthwhile charitable drives that take place in the community and is grateful when school employees give them their support.
Gratified.
However, the solicitation of funds from staff members through the use of school personnel and school time is prohibited by the Conflict of Interest law. Therefore, no solicitation of funds for charitable purposes should be made among staff members. Staff members, of course, remain free to support charitable causes of their own selection.
That's very clear.
Yes.
Yeah, and it lines up with what we learned at Maskin in our ethics class, so I think it makes total sense.
And we did check the conflict of interest references are all included. Next, we have Gbed, Online Fundraising and Solicitations - Crowdfunding. This is not included in your current policy, so if you were on the Brockton Public Schools website, you wouldn't find this at this time. This is an MASC policy that's missing from your policy book. I wrote the recommendation to add this policy. I would assume crowdfunding probably came post-2002 when the last time this section was really looked at. So we'll go ahead and read this one as well. School district employees shall comply with all of the following provisions related to online solicitations and the use of crowdfunding services for school-related purposes, as well as all applicable laws, regulations, and district policies. No online fundraising may occur except as provided below. The superintendent shall have final authority to approve any online fundraising activities by school district employees and shall determine and communicate to principals the circumstances under which online fundraising proposals shall require superintendent or school committee approval in accordance with law and school district policy, or policy KCD. The principal of each school shall approve all online fundraising activities within their buildings prior to any employee posting any such fundraising solicitation. Any solicitation shall be for educational purposes only, such as field trips, supplies, supplemental materials, books, etc. The solicitation of personal items, such as coats, nutritional snacks, etc., shall only be to benefit students directly. To the extent an employee solicits any technology or software, the employee shall secure the prior written approval of the Director of Technology or designee prior to any such solicitation. Any employee seeking to display or post a photograph of a student in conjunction with a fundraising solicitation must first secure the written consent of the student's parent or guardian. Employees shall not use a crowdfunding source or set up their appeal in such a way that they are asking for donations directly from people over whom the employee making the request has authority or with whom the public employee is having official dealings, such as the parents, guardians of students in a teacher's classroom, The solicitation can say classroom X needs tissues and crayons, but it shouldn't be directed to parents or guardians who have shared email addresses with the teacher for purposes of communicating about their specific student. Employees using crowdfunding services shall periodically disclose in writing to the superintendent the names of all individuals whom the employee has directly solicited in any manner, including but not limited to oral, written, or electronic solicitation. The superintendent shall maintain these disclosures as public records available for public review. Employees may only use crowdfunding services that send the items or proceeds solicited by the employee directly to the employee's school or to the school district. Employees must verify under the crowdfunding service's terms and conditions that they meet all requirements for such solicitation. Items or proceeds directly sent to employees are considered gifts to the employee and may result in violation of state ethics laws. If an employee's proposal is approved by the crowdfunding service, the employee agrees to use donated materials solely as stated in the employee's proposal. If a solicitation is not fully funded within the time period required by the crowdfunding service, or the solicitation cannot be concluded for any reason, every attempt will be made to return donations to the donors. Donations unable to be returned shall only be used as account credits for future solicitations. Unless otherwise approved by the superintendent in writing, all goods and/or proceeds solicited and received through any online solicitation shall become the property of the school committee and not of the individual employee who solicited the items or funds. The employee is prohibited from taking any such items or funds to another school or location without the superintendent's written approval.
And that's the full mask.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Our next policy is Gbec, which is titled Drug-Free Workplace. This is a MASC policy. It has been updated to reflect its most recent version. Again, several changes, and the new policy reads: the school district will provide a drug-free workplace and certifies that it will, number 1, notify all employees in writing that the unlawful manufacture, distribution, dispensing, possession, or use of a controlled substance is prohibited in the district's workplace, and specify the actions that will be taken against employees for violation of such prohibitions. Number 2, establish a drug-free awareness program to inform employees about the dangers of drug abuse in the workplace. The district's policy of maintaining a drug-free workplace and available drug counseling, rehabilitation, employee assistance programs, and the penalty that may be imposed on employees for drug abuse violations occurring in the workplace. Number 3, make it a requirement that each employee whose employment is funded by a federal grant be given a copy of the statement as required. Number 4, notify the employee in the required statement that as a condition of employment under the grant, the employee will abide by the terms of the statement and will notify the district of any criminal drug statute conviction for a violation occurring in the workplace no later than 5 days after such conviction. Number 5, notify the federal agency within 10 days after receiving notice from an employee or otherwise receiving notice of such conviction. Number 6, take one of the following actions within 30 days of receiving notice with respect to any employee who is so convicted. Take appropriate personnel action against such an employee, up to and including termination, or require such employee to participate satisfactorily in a drug abuse assistance or rehabilitation program approved for such purposes by a federal, state, or local health, law enforcement, or other appropriate agency. There was some language that was kind of cleaned up and removed. Again, this policy was last visited in, I believe, 2002.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
So on number 4, where it says notify the employee in the required statement that as a condition of employment under the grant, the employee will abide by the terms of the statement and will notify the district of any criminal drug statute conviction for a violation occurring in the workplace no later than 5 days after such conviction. What I'm trying to figure out is if there's any accountability factors after number 4 for if they don't report. Did I miss that? So I guess my question is, if an employee sees some sort of drug abuse or see some sort of contraband, if you will, and they don't report it, and then later on, someone else finds out that that employee was in fact part of it, is there an accountability factor in there for the employee that didn't report it within 5 days?
I see what you're saying. We could add language to number 6, which starts with take one of the following actions within 30 days of receiving notice. You could add a few words such as take one of the following actions within 30 days of receiving notice, or within, I guess if you don't receive notice though that they were convicted.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that what happens to the person that doesn't report, and then we find out that that person was in fact there and should have reported. Because the mindset tends to be, you know, not my monkey, not my circus, I don't want to deal with it. And so what we want to do is encourage people to
Come forward.
Come forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure what the best way of doing that is. I don't want to penalize people, but at the same time, I want it to be that, you know, it's helping the community more than it is you standing back and not getting involved. If that makes sense.
It does. If you'd like, I can make a note of that and send our discussion points to legal and see if they could craft just a couple sentences.
Yeah, I mean, I think this just protects us, and then what if something came out that we found out someone knew and didn't say anything, and that person would have been an integral part of whatever's going on?
So the sentiment is to provide a possible degree of merit for honesty.
Or accountability if they don't come forward. Do you know, one or the other? And I may be overthinking this, I'm just kind of pointing it out like, okay, we want them to report it within 5 days, but what if they don't? Then what's the point in the policy?
Okay, noted.
Thanks.
Next, we have policy Gbec-E, which is titled Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988. This is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy, but the language is consistent with the previous policy that we just read, Gbec, which also addresses the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988. So my recommendation would be to omit this policy, stick with the MSAC policy, and we'll also look into adding that additional language.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Next, we have policy Gbeca, Employee Responsible Use. This is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. My recommendation was to retain this policy with a few small changes, and the legal department also made some additional changes. This is the responsible use policy is the message that pops up whenever somebody signs in to use the internet on a school device, if that makes sense. It's that district-wide communication that says that you accept the terms of use. So the changes that were made were primarily in language. The law department added a few terms to make this consistent with the terms that are used in specifically, I believe, the Non-Discrimination Act and the policy that is consistent with that. So the first, I guess the first paragraph reads, the Brockton Public School District provides technology resources to its employees for educational and administrative purposes. The goal in providing these resources is to promote educational excellence in the Brockton Public Schools by facilitating resource sharing and communication among employees and students. The policy governs the use of computers, tablets, phones, internet, intranet, voicemail, and email resources. The use of Brockton Public School systems technology resources is granted to employees primarily for job-related functions. Violations of this policy may result in loss of access and further disciplinary action up to and including dismissal, civil litigation, and/or criminal prosecution for misuse of this resource. The Brockton Public School District does not attempt to articulate all possible violations of this policy. Users are expected to utilize the school system's computers, computer networks, and other electronic media in a responsible and professional manner, and to model such behavior for students. During work hours and/or while using BPS technology resources, including BPS Internet, employees will not, number 1, knowingly send, receive, or display communications that ridicule, disparage, or criticize a person, a group of people, or an organization based upon any legally protected category, including but not limited to race, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity and/or expression, age, disability, or religion, pregnancy, or pregnancy-related condition. Number 2, knowingly send, receive, or display communications that threaten, insult, harass, or defame others. Number 3, knowingly send, receive, or display sexually oriented images or messages. Number 4, knowingly violate any local, state, or federal statute and regulation, including but not limited to copyright laws. Number 5, knowingly disrupt, disable, damage, or interfere with services, equipment, or other uses, unless doing so is in the best interests of staff and/or students of the Brockton Public Schools and with the permission of the employee's supervisor. Number 6, access, assist, or allow others to access equipment, files, passwords, user codes, or information without authorization. Number 7, knowingly use electronic media for indiscriminate social or personal purposes and/or conducting outside business. And number 8, knowingly use any technology resource of BPS, including internet, for political campaign activities. The Brockton Public Schools reserves the right to review, audit, intercept, access, and disclose all matters on BPS computers, internet access, intranet, and email systems as business conditions and/or security considerations warrant, with or without employee notice, during or after employee working hours. An employee's use of BPS-provided password does not restrict the school system's right to access electronic communications. Employees using BPS resources should have no expectation of privacy in their email, voicemail, or on the internet or intranet. Accordingly, employees must ensure that their electronic communications are appropriate, lawful, and in compliance with the provisions of this policy at all times. It is the expectation of the Brockton Public Schools that employees report any knowledge of misuse or abuse to technological resources by faculty or students to their direct supervisor. Any user who chooses to bring their own device, BYOD, to work and accesses the BPS network and/or wireless internet through their device is expected to adhere to the Brockton Public Schools responsible use policy and guidelines. All messages and information created, sent, or retrieved on the network are in the property of Brockton Public Schools.
Only question that I have is up on beginning of that same paragraph where it says the Brockton Public Schools, and this is just being picky, where it says access and disclose all matters on BPS computers, internet access. Wouldn't we just say BPS technology in general? And the only reason I say that is the last time this was updated, people weren't reading their email on their phones. They weren't like,
That's very true.
You know, I'm just saying the technology moves so fast that I'm not sure if we want to use the term, the overall umbrella term, technology in a couple of places versus trying to label every single device that we are currently, that we use today in 2021, 22. If that makes sense. That's just a note, is all.
Okay.
Just because it moves so fast.
Just taking a look. This may pop up one more time. Let me just look down the list here.
And then the only other thing I was saying is there somewhere in here where it reads that all technology and the use, I think it basically intimates that all technology and the use of the technology is the property of the Brockton Public School systems, and that it doesn't actually belong to the employee.
That makes sense. So we're on Gbca. So we will replace the words.
Or add technology and then maybe like a semicolon or, you know what I mean? And then list out what is current today, but technology kind of covers everything, whether it's internet, intranet, wireless, non-wireless, all of it.
So something to the merit of and/or all
Yeah,
technological devices
exactly.
owned by. Got it.
And I'm just thinking if it takes us another 5 years to update this, the language will still be
Relevant.
yes.
Yes. Owned by BPS. Okay. Good catch. The next policy we have is policy Gbed, titled Tobacco Use on School Property by Staff Members Prohibited. This is a MASC policy. It's been updated to reflect its most recent version. It now reads, use of any tobacco products, including but not limited to cigarettes, cigars, little cigars, chewing tobacco, pipe tobacco, and snuff in electronic cigarettes, electronic cigars, electronic pipes, or other similar products that rely on vaporization or aerosolization within the school buildings, school facilities, on school grounds or school buses, or at school-sponsored events by any individual, including school personnel, is prohibited at all times. Staff members who violate this policy will be referred to their immediate supervisor.
Makes sense.
And I do appreciate that that one does read, or similar products. Okay, next we have policy Gbgb, titled Staff Personal Security and Safety. This is a MASC policy. It's been updated to reflect its most recent version, and the policy now reads, through its overall safety program and various policies pertaining to school personnel, the committee will seek to assure the safety of employees during their working hours and assist them in the maintenance of good health. Employees offered a position as a custodian, maintenance worker, or food service worker must successfully pass a pre-employment physical examination provided at school committee cost prior to the date of employment. The superintendent may require an employee to submit to a physical examination by a physician appointed by the school district whenever that employee's health appears to be a hazard to children or others in the school district, or when a doctor's certificate is legally required to verify need for sick leave. School employees, their families, and members of their household are eligible to use the confidential services provided by the municipality's Employee Assistance Program. I did send this one to Human Resources just to check on the terms of custodian, maintenance worker, or food service worker. I wasn't sure if there were any other groups that should be included, and no other groups were sent back.
Okay.
Next, we have policy Gbge, Domestic Violence Leave Policy. This is a MASC policy that is missing from your policy book. It is not currently included. My recommendation was to add the policy, and your legal department seconded that notion. The policy reads, it shall be the policy of the school district to permit an employee to take up to 15 days of domestic violence leave from work in any 12-month period. In order to be eligible for said leave, first, the employee or a family member of the employee must be a victim of abusive behavior. Second, the employee must be using the leave from work to seek or obtain medical attention, counseling, victim services, or legal assistance, secure housing, obtain a protective order from court, appear before a grand jury, meet with a district attorney or other law enforcement official, or attend child custody proceedings or address other issues directly related to the abusive behavior against the employee or family member of the employee. And third, the employee must not be the perpetrator of the abusive behavior against such employee's family member. The employee shall have the sole discretion to determine whether this leave shall be paid or unpaid. An employee seeking such leave shall exhaust all annual or vacation leave, personal leave, and sick leave available to the employee prior to requesting or taking domestic violence leave, unless the employer waives this requirement. Except in cases of imminent danger to the health or safety of an employee, advance notice of domestic violence leave shall be required. If such imminent danger exists, the employee shall notify the employer within 3 workdays that the leave was taken. The notification may be communicated to the employer by the employee, a family member of the employee, or the employee's counselor, social worker, healthcare worker, member of the clergy, shelter worker, legal advocate, or other professional who has assisted the employee in addressing the effects of the abusive behavior. If an unscheduled absence occurs, an employer shall not take any negative action against the employee if the employee, within 30 days from the authorized absence or of unauthorized absences, provides any of the documentation found in numbers 1 through 7 below. An employer may require documentation that the employee or employee's family member has been a victim of abusive behavior and that the leave is consistent with clauses 1, 2, and 3 above, provided, however, that an employer shall not require an employee to show evidence of an arrest, conviction, or other law enforcement documentation for such abusive behavior. The documentation shall be provided to the employer within a reasonable period after the employer requests it. An employee shall satisfy this documentation requirement by providing any one of the following documents to the employer. Number 1, a protective order, order of equitable relief, or other documentation issued by a court of competent jurisdiction as a result of abusive behavior against the employee or employee's family member. Number 2, a document under the letterhead of the court, provider, or public agency which the employee attended for the purposes of acquiring assistance as it relates to the employee or family member. Number 3, a police report or statement of a victim or witness provided to police documenting the abusive behavior. Number 4, documentation that the perpetrator of the abusive behavior has admitted to sufficient facts to support a finding of guilt, or has been convicted of, or has been adjudicated a juvenile delinquent by reason of any offense constituting abusive behavior. Number 5, medical documentation of treatment as a result of the abusive behavior. Number 6, a sworn statement signed under the penalties of perjury provided by a counselor, social worker, healthcare worker, member of the clergy, shelter worker, legal advocate, or other professional who has assisted the employee in addressing the effects of the abusive behavior. Number 7, a sworn statement signed under the penalties of perjury from the employee attesting that the employee has been a victim of or is a family member of a victim of abusive behavior. All information related to the employee's leave shall be kept confidential and shall not be disclosed, except to the extent that disclosure is, first, requested or consented to in writing by the employee; second, ordered to be released by a court of competent jurisdiction; third, otherwise required by applicable federal or state law; fourth, required in the course of an investigation authorized by law enforcement, including but not limited to an investigation by the Attorney General; or fifth, necessary to protect the safety of the employee or other employed at the workplace. The superintendent shall ensure that notice is provided to all employees in the next school year and beyond by appropriately amending the district's employee handbooks by whatever title they may be known, or by direct notice about the domestic violence law, and securing the employee's signature acknowledging receipt of the handbook and notice. The superintendent shall be responsible for notifying all current employees, unless they have been notified through the handbook, of this policy in a manner that they deem appropriate. No employers shall coerce, interfere with, restrain, or deny the exercise of, or any attempt to exercise any rights provided herein, or to make leave requested or taken contingent upon whether or not the victim maintains contact with the alleged abuser. No employee shall discharge or in any other manner discriminate against an employee for exercising the employee's rights under law. The taking of domestic violence leave shall not result in the loss of any employment benefit accrued prior to the date of such leave. Upon the employee's return from such leave, they shall be entitled to restoration to the employee's original job or to an equivalent position. Definitions of abuse, abusive behavior, domestic violence, employees, and family members may be found in the laws referenced below, which are Mass General Laws 149, 52E, Section 10, and Chapter 260 of the Acts of 2014.
Wow, I'm sure you need water at this point.
I do.
The only question I have is in I think it's the third paragraph, the paragraph that begins with accepting cases of imminent danger. The very last line says the documentation shall be provided to the employer within a reasonable period after the employer requests it. I just have a problem with reasonable period because that is subjective to who's ever reading it. So is that 30 days? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I feel like that's a little bit of a open, I don't know.
I agree, and I would recommend a discussion amongst the committee as to,
What do you guys think?
1 week?
I would, honestly, I was gonna say 2 weeks or even 30 days, but like, if somebody's trying to collect, I don't want an employee that's going through domestic violence of any kind or their family to be pressured because they have to submit documentation, but I also feel like there's an accountability, so I look at it like a reasonable period, or even at like a maximum of 30 days, give them a month to collect all their documentation, because if they're taking the days that they're given, that's almost half a month right there, and so I'm trying to think of it and be fair, but what do you guys think?
30 days is probably good. What do you think, Judy?
perfect. We'll add the language 30 days to section Gbge, domestic violence. That was the third paragraph, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Next, we have policy Gbgf, family and medical leave. This is an important one. This is an MASC policy that's missing from your policy book right now. There was a recommendation to add the MASC policy as is, and your law department came back and said they'd like to make it a little bit of a more robust policy. And this particular policy, it might need discussion with your union before it's adopted at large. So I would encourage discussion by this committee here to kind of firm it up to where you would like it to be, and then that should probably be a follow-up conversation with Human Resources.
Okay.
So I'll let you maybe read this one, but this probably needs a little bit of digesting.
Yep.
So now that takes us all the way down to page 26, which is policy GBI, staff participation in political activities. This is another MASC policy that's missing from your Brockton Public Schools policy book. The recommendation is to add this policy, and the policy reads: the school committee recognizes that employees of the school district have the same fundamental civic responsibilities and privileges as other citizens. Among these are campaigning for an elective public office and holding an elective or appointive office. In connection with campaigning, an employee will not use school district facilities, equipment, or supplies, discuss their campaign with school personnel or students during the working day, use any time during the working day for campaigning purposes, and under no circumstances will students be pressured into campaigning for any staff member.
Agreed.
Okay. Next, we have policy Gbj, personnel records. This is a MASC policy that was updated to reflect its most recent version. Mostly some small language changes. The policy now reads: information about staff members is required for the daily administration of the school district, for implementing salary and other personnel policies, for budget and financial planning, for responding to appropriate inquiries about employees, and for meeting the school committee's education reporting requirements. To meet these needs, the superintendent will implement a comprehensive and efficient system of personnel records maintenance and control under the following guidelines. Number 1, a personnel folder for each present and former employee will be accurately maintained in the central administrative office for the period required by law. In addition to the application for employment and references, the folders will contain records and information relative to compensation, payroll deductions, evaluations, and any other pertinent personnel information as defined by law and policy. Number 2, the superintendent will be the official custodian for personnel files and will have overall responsibility for maintaining and preserving the confidentiality of the files within the provisions of the law. Number 3, Personnel records are considered confidential under the law and will not be open to public inspection. Access to personnel files will be limited to persons authorized by the superintendent to use the files for appropriate business reasons. Number 4, each employee will have the right, upon written request, to review the contents of their own personal file. And number 5, employees may make written objections to any information contained in the file. Any written objection must be signed by the staff member and will become part of the employee's personnel file. And lastly, number 6, lists of school district employees' names and home addresses will be released only to governmental agencies as required for official reports or by the laws.
Makes sense.
Next, we have policy Gbjc, which is titled Teachers Personnel File. This is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. The recommendation was to retain this policy. More or less, we couldn't really come up with any reason not to, but it's certainly up for discussion. So the policy reads, letters from parents, favorable or unfavorable, are not to be included in the teacher's personnel file in the central office of the Brockton School Department. All letters will be kept by the building principal. When a letter is received from a parent complaining about the conduct, performance, etc. of a teacher, it is to be brought to the immediate attention of the teacher and investigated by the principal. If there is merit to the complaint as determined by the investigation, it is the responsibility of the principal to submit his or her findings in writing to the Senior Director of Human Resources. The findings will be placed in the personnel file and any other appropriate action will be taken. So we have, again, it's in your policy book now. We had no reason to remove it, and we also had no reason to believe that this wasn't current practice. Whether or not it's followed exactly the way that it's written, I can't speak to.
That's exactly what my question was. I'm like, are we actively using this policy right now? And the other question I would have is, it is, in fact, the principal's responsibility to respond to a letter that is, that's negative, but what if they don't respond to it? Is that somewhere else? Or is that accountability factor under the overall staff and not under teacher? Do you know what I'm saying? Is this a subset of a bigger policy?
I would say it's, most closely aligned with the prior policy, Gbj, personnel records. And a consideration would be to add, number 8 to the prior policy that specifically addresses the content that's in this policy.
Yeah, so instead of having a whole separate one, even, did you say a number 8? Is that what you said?
Correct. Number 7, I'm sorry, right, the last one goes up to 6.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was gonna say, is we use this language and just add it to the regular policy so that it doesn't, the regular personnel records policy, so that it doesn't stand alone.
Okay, so we will add teacher's personnel file, and I am going to recommend one change, which is somewhere I saw his or her,
Yes. I
and
saw
we're going
that.
to change
Findings.
that to their findings, yes.
Perfect. I was gonna talk about the pronouns, but yes, that's perfect.
So we'll make that number 7 of policy Gbj, personnel records. Okay. Next is policy Gbk, called Staff Complaints and Grievances. This is an MASC policy that's missing from your Brockton Public Schools policy book right now. However, my recommendation was to omit this policy, and that was seconded by the Law Department. And the reason being, all CBAs have a grievance procedure that they are currently following as practice. This policy would be somewhat redundant, and it just didn't really seem like it was needed.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. What do you guys think?
To not do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me too.
He agrees with the law department. Right?
Veto?
Perfect. So next we have policy Gca, professional staff positions. This is an MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version, and it reads, all professional staff positions in the school district will be created initially by the school committee. It is the committee's intent to activate a sufficient number of positions to accomplish the school district's goals and objectives and to provide for the equitable staffing of each school building. Although such positions may remain temporarily unfilled, only the committee may abolish a position it has created. Each time a new position is established by the committee, the superintendent will present for the committee's approval a job description for the position, which specifies the job holder's qualification and the job's performance responsibilities. The superintendent will maintain a comprehensive set of job descriptions for all positions.
No, that's pretty standard.
Next, we have policy Gcba, professional staff salary schedules. This is another MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version. There's actually only a few language changes to this one. The first paragraph is entirely the same. The second paragraph, we've replaced the word merit for salary, and the sentence now reads, it is the responsibility of the superintendent to present evidence to the school committee to support recommendations for salary increases as opposed to merit increases.
Oh, that makes sense. Everybody loves merit, but they'd rather salary.
Next, we have policy Gcbb, employment of principals. Another MASC policy updated to reflect its most recent version. And the policy now reads, principals shall be employed by the school district under individual contracts of employment. Said contracts shall be submitted to the school committee for their approval of all terms concerning compensation and/or benefits prior to the presentation of a contract of employment to the principal. The compensation and/or benefit levels above referenced may be exceeded only with the approval of the school committee. Initial contracts issued to principals may be up to 3 years in length and may be reissued by the superintendent at levels of compensation and/or benefits determined by the school committee, provided that the superintendent may employ a principal under the terms and conditions of the previous contract of employment. The length of second and subsequent contracts of employment for principals shall be in accordance with state law. As a condition of employment, each principal must maintain current certification, adhere to the policies and goals of the school committee and the directives of the superintendent, and annually must submit with the school council the educational goals and school improvement plan for the school buildings under their direction.
I agree with that.
Sounds good.
Okay. Next is policy Gcbc, titled Professional Staff Supplementary Pay Plans. Another MASC policy updated to reflect its most recent version. MASC last visited this policy in September 2016, as opposed to, I think Brockton was 2002. Certain assignments require extra responsibility or extra time over and above that required of other staff members who are on the same position on basic salary schedule. When such supplemental assignments require extra time and responsibility beyond that regularly expected of teachers, they will be rewarded with extra compensation. Assignments that are to be accorded extra compensation will be designated by the committee. Appointments to these positions will be made by the superintendent for district-wide positions or by the principal with the approval of the superintendent for building-based personnel. The amount of compensation for the position will be established by the committee at the time the position is created. All such positions held by teaching staff will be contained in the applicable collective bargaining agreement. A teacher who is offered and undertakes a supplementary pay assignment will receive a supplementary contract specifying the pay, duration, and terms of the assignment. If a teacher will not be extended the assignment for the following school year, but will remain on the teaching staff, he or she, which we should change to they, will be so notified in writing prior to the expiration of the contract. Upon termination of the assignment, the supplementary pay will cease.
I just want to make sure I understand that because, hold on, a teacher who is offered to and undertakes a supplementary pay assignment. I just want to make sure we're not guaranteeing anyone outside of that current year the additional stipend, if you will, or work or task.
This is in regards to the last paragraph.
So basically what we're saying is that we're saying that the superintendent will be getting a contract that ensures that that won't happen. Is that different than the way this read before? If a teacher will not be extended the assignment for the following school year but will remain on the teaching staff, he or they will be so notified in writing prior to the expiration of the contract. So the contract is a contract for the additional work, and so that's what it is. They'll be getting a contract for whatever these additional tasks are with a start and end date.
So that particular section, we did have one comment from legal who said, I believe some of the positions are automatically reposted each year.
But is that, it's not, even though they're automatically reposted, the individuals that were in those positions they still have to apply for those. So I guess my question is, each year, are we going to be issuing new contracts to everyone that's doing additional tasks, or did you see what I'm saying? I'm confused.
I would say, I think we need a little bit of clarification, maybe from Human Resources, as to what these contracts specifically look like right now and what the process is.
Yeah, I'm concerned that there is this mindset that if I do this, and I've been doing this every single year, it rolls around again, I don't sign a contract, but everybody knows this is what I do after school. And I'm making this up, this is hypothetical. Whereas then you have somebody else that comes on board and they're like, oh, I think I would like to do that. Is it, is this just assumed it goes to that teacher, to that person, to that staff member? Or are we now going to be having each person sign a contract to ensure there is a start and end date and it's not guaranteed for anyone? It's open to all when it opens up again. That's the only piece that concerns me, or I don't understand.
I think the first part of the sentence, which reads, a teacher who is offered and undertakes a supplementary pay assignment, I'm assuming the term offered implies the position has been posted.
Yes.
And to legally post the position, that requires.
And then the next sentence says, will receive a supplementary contract specifying pay, duration, and terms of the assignment. So is this going to happen for everyone? It is? Okay, thanks. That's exactly what I wanted to know. Perfect.
One
Thanks,
term.
Melinda.
Okay.
So I think that's what's different from before. Before, I'm not sure that we did contracts for those supplemental tasks, and I think now we are doing them. Is that what you're saying? Perfect. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
So leave the language as is the
Correct.
request. Okay. Just
Like
making
I
sure.
said, I wanted to make sure I understood it, and that's in fact what we're doing. And so
Perfect.
Melinda
One
confirmed.
question, Alyssa. Is this referring to coaches after,
I believe this is only referring to teachers.
as coaches?
Oh,
This is what I meant.
would you like it to?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we should be very specific. Melinda, do teaching coaches currently do the 1 year? They do. So why don't we add after the word teacher, a teacher and/or teaching coach? Does that sound
Oh,
appropriate?
I think a teacher who is offered or undertakes
Coaching.
any, you know, I think we have to open up to anything, because some may tutor, some may teach additional classes, some may be part of after-school activities, some may coach, like Tim said. I'm just, you know, a lot of teachers do the extra, and so maybe we just change the language.
So I guess the question is, what do we define as a supplementary pay assignment?
Yes, exactly.
Which,
The BEA, would it be a union position?
Yeah, you're right.
If it says teacher, that would pretty much cover
Mm.
within the union. We can always check with HR.
if you'd like, I can check with HR, see if there is a definition for supplementary pay assignment. And if it's as simple as that term encompassing all the positions that we're discussing, we'll just add a note to the bottom of the policy.
Perfect.
Okay.
I think that just covers us. Thanks,
Kathy,
Melinda.
Kat, we have agreements on this just last week.
Tim,
We didn't have agreements on this last week.
The next policy
thank you.
is Gcc, titled Family and Medical Leave. This was the Brockton Public Schools specific policy for family and medical leave. The recommendation is to omit this policy and stick with the policy that we discussed earlier, Gbgf, family and medical leave, which is the MASC policy, which we talked about dissecting at a later date.
Yep.
But as you can see, it's quite a bit more lengthy than what you currently have in place. Okay.
Yeah, 100%
Okay.
agree with getting rid of this. And we do have to dig into that, because that's like 10 pages.
Yes. And immediately after, you'll see Gccc-E, family and medical leave. This is the supporting policy that you have in place right now. Some of this is redundant, but some of it has been changed. So this is what you're going to want to compare that new policy to. And I can, if you'd like, I can send you a document with track changes between this policy and the MASC policy, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be
Okay.
super helpful.
Yeah, no problem. So let's see, that is dash D. Okay. That brings us down to page 44, Gcd, certified staff vacations and holidays. This is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. I inquired with the legal department on whether or not this was still relevant, and legal has recommended omitting this policy for the purpose that CBAs and individual contracts cover the context of the language that's written in GCD.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Next is GCE, professional staff recruiting and posting of vacancies. This is a MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version. And the policy reads, "It is the responsibility of the superintendent, with the assistance of the administrative staff, to determine the personnel needs of the school district, and it is the responsibility of the principal, in consultation with the superintendent, to determine the personnel needs of the individual schools. In addition, school councils may review personnel requirements as a means of evaluating the needs of a school. Any recommendations for the creation or elimination of a position must be approved by the school committee. The search for good teachers and other professional employees will extend to a wide variety of educational institutions and geographical areas. It will take into consideration the characteristics of the city or town and the need for a heterogeneous staff from various cultural backgrounds. Recruitment procedures will not overlook the talents and potential of individuals already employed by the school district. Any current employee may apply for any position for which he or she has certification and meets other stated requirements. Openings in the schools will be posted in sufficient time before the position is filled to permit current employees to submit applications. So right off the bat, I can tell you, I apologize, I missed this, but he or she should be changed to they.
And town should be city?
That's correct.
Okay.
I think we did that one opposite. Any other discussion points for this policy?
No, that looks good.
Next is GCE-E, Certified Staff Recruitment. This is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. The recommendation is to omit this policy as these are practices that are covered in human resources protocols. Some of them have been updated, and it didn't feel like it necessarily belonged in your
In
policy
here.
book.
Yeah, I agree.
Next, we have policy GCF, Professional Staff Hiring. This is a MASC policy. It's been updated to reflect its most recent version. And the policy reads, through its employment policies, the district will strive to attract, secure, and hold the highest qualified personnel for all professional positions. The selection process will be based upon awareness to candidates who will devote themselves to the education and welfare of the children attending the schools. It is the responsibility of the superintendent and of persons to whom they, we're going to change that, delegates this responsibility to determine the personnel needs of the school district and to locate suitable candidates. No position may be created without the approval of the school committee. The district's goal is to employ and retain personnel who are motivated, will strive always to do their best, and are committed to providing the best educational environment for the children. It will be the duty of the superintendent to see that persons considered for employment in the schools meet all certification requirements and the requirements of the committee for the type of position for which the nomination is made. The following guidelines will be used in the selection of personnel. Number 1, there will be no discrimination in the hiring process due to race, color, religion, national origin, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, genetic information, ancestry, military status, disability, pregnancy, or pregnancy-related condition. Number 2, the quality of instruction is enhanced by a staff with a wide variation in background, educational preparation, and previous experience. Number 3, the administrator responsible for the hiring of a staff member, and in the case of district-wide positions for the position of principals, it is the superintendent, and for building-based personnel, it is the principal, is directed to establish a representative screening committee. The administrator has the final say in determining who will be hired, but it is expected that the screening committee's input will be a factor in the decision. For those positions where the hiring authority rests with the school committee, a representative screening committee may be established by the school committee, or the school committee may direct the superintendent to establish a screening committee to assist the superintendent in making their recommendation to the school committee.
That makes sense.
Sounds good.
And that is a process that we're doing right now.
Perfect. Next, we have GCG, Substitute Professional Staff Employment. This is an MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version.
You don't have to go over that. It's only
Okay.
district. I'm like, there's so few changes on that one.
Perfect. Next, we have GCIA, Philosophy of Staff Development. This is also an MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version. It has become quite a bit more robust, so the new policy reads, all staff members will be encouraged in and provided with suitable opportunities for the development of increased competencies beyond those they may attain through the performance of their assigned duties and assistance from supervisors. Opportunities for professional growth may be provided through such means as the following. Number 1, planned in-service programs or workshops offered within the school district from time to time. These may include participation by outside consultants. Number 2, membership on curriculum development committees drawing personnel from within and without the school district. Number 3, release time for visits to other classrooms and schools and for attendance at conferences, workshops, and other professional meetings. Number 4, leaves of absence for graduate study, research, and travel. Number 5, partial payment of tuition for approved courses. The superintendent will have authority to approve or deny release time for conferences and visitations and reimbursements for expenses provided such activities are within budget allocations for this purpose. I will just say number 1 through 5, they're all pretty general despite being quite a bit more lengthy than what it was before. The policy was only 1 sentence before, but they're all very general terms that I believe are primarily covered in most of the contracts that are existing within the district.
Did you have a chance to check? I'm assuming that's Sarah?
Yeah.
So I was actually wondering about that as well, like, you know, how, if someone wanted to approach their supervisor and said, listen, I would like to take this course, like how, you know, does that apply to all staff or?
I believe that there's general language that is uniform across the contracts that applies to reimbursements and things like that. I can get that language if it would be helpful.
No, just, I was thinking the same thing. As long as it applies to everybody and
Yes.
there, you know, there's equality across the board, no big deal. That's
Okay.
fine.
We'll double check my notes, but I didn't see anything there.
Okay, thanks.
Next, we have GCIAA, Professional Development Goals. This is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. The recommendation is to omit this policy,
Yes.
mostly to maintain consistency through your policy update. We've removed, I want to say every policy so far that's been related to goals, and we've kind of rehoused them in departments, in school building practices and protocols and things that they can revisit annually with their own discretion.
Yeah, I agree with that, because some of these bullets they're a little antiquated,
I agree.
so, yeah, that makes sense.
Next, we have GCJ, Professional Teacher Status. It's an MASC policy updated to reflect its most recent version. There's very few changes to this policy. I think the only language that was added is in the 3rd paragraph, which added the term legally qualified subject to applicable collective bargaining agreements, which was, I think, that was a MASC addition, but it was also, it was seconded by the law department that should definitely be there.
Yeah, because that's the underlying rule for those cohort groups, so it makes sense.
Next is GCK,
Yep.
Professional Staff Assignments and Transfers. Again, another MASC policy updated to reflect its most recent version. And this was only language changes. Certified has become professional staff members. And the word system, again, was replaced with district. The context of the policy remained the same.
Yeah, this looks good.
Next, we have Policy GCKC, Nurse Staff Assignment. This is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. The recommendation was to omit this policy and refer this to individual or bargaining unit contracts for position requirements and department assignments.
Agreed.
Next, we have GCL, Certified Staff Time Schedules, another Brockton Public Schools specific policy. And again, the recommendation was to omit, as this policy only applies to limited staff populations, and it can be addressed in individual personnel contracts or union personnel contracts.
Sounds good.
Okay. Next is policy GCO, evaluation of professional staff. This one is the MASC policy related to professional staff. It's been updated to reflect its most recent version, and the new policy reads, in order to assure a high quality of teacher and administrator performance and to advance the instructional programs of the schools, a continuous program for teacher and administrator evaluation will be established by the school committee. Regular reports will be made to the superintendent concerning the outcomes of these evaluations. The evaluation process will include, number 1, the development and periodic review of techniques and procedures for making evaluations. Number 2, interpretation of the information gained in the evaluative process in terms of the objectives of the instructional program. Number 3, the application of the information gained to the planning of staff development and in-service training activities which are designed to improve instruction and increase teacher competence. The evaluation process will include self-evaluation, supervisor-initiated observation, and teacher-initiated observations. The formal evaluations will be written and will be discussed by the supervisor and the person being evaluated. The discussions may either precede or follow the writing of the evaluation document. Copies of the written document will be signed by both parties and incorporated into the personnel files of the teacher or administrator. In addition, the individual and his department chairman, if applicable, will receive a signed copy. The signature should indicate that the evaluation has been read and discussed. The written evaluation should be specific in terms of the person's strengths and weaknesses. Those areas where improvement is needed should be clearly set forth, and recommendations for improvement should be made. Subsequent evaluations should address themselves to any improvement or to any continuing difficulty that is observed.
Oh, that's pretty specific.
I did look at with this one quite a few other district evaluation,
process.
yes,
Yeah.
and they all, I didn't see any that added any additional language. This seemed to be a pretty standard, straightforward policy.
And this actually lines up with what we're doing in the district for developing teachers and what, you know, Superintendent Thomas is working on. So I think it reads perfect.
Great.
Sounds good.
Next, we have GCP, Recruitment, Interviewing, and Appointment of Candidates for Promotional Positions. This is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. The recommendation was to omit this policy. And again, different CBAs have different procedures. This was just a little too general to kind of go across the board for everybody.
Yeah, agreed. And again, the language is pretty
Outdated.
antiquated.
Yes.
Omit it.
Next, we have Gcqd, Resignation of Professional Staff Members. This is an MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version. This is mostly language updates with the addition of the end of one sentence, which is in the first paragraph, which now reads, professional staff members may discontinue their service in the school district during the school year by submitting a written notice of intent to resign to the appropriate hiring authority, barring any contract provision requiring specific notice, procedures, or requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the policy remains the same.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Next, we have policy Gcqf, suspension and dismissal of professional staff members. This is a MASC policy updated to reflect its most recent version. However, you will notice I wanted to leave it reflected in the policy. Numbers 1 through 3, and as well as the following section starting with provide the individual and ending with, I believe it's inform employees who have a right to request a hearing under appropriate laws. That entire section, the law department has requested that you omit. Same idea, different laws and CBAs will apply. It was too general, so the recommendation is to leave the policy with just the first paragraph, which reads, "The superintendent will strive to assist personnel to perform their duties efficiently. However, the superintendent may dismiss any employee in accordance with state law. Further, the committee recognizes the constitutional rights of the district's employees and assures them the protection of due process of law. To guarantee such rights, a system of constitutionally and legally sound procedures will be followed in each case of suspension or dismissal of an employee."
And then the policy ends there?
Correct. And
Perfect.
policy.
Yep, agreed.
Okay. Next, we have policy Gcrd, tutoring for pay. This is a MASC policy that's missing from Brockton Public Schools policies. The recommendation is to add this policy. And the policy starts with the definition of tutoring, which means giving private instruction or help to an individual or group for which the teacher receives remuneration other than through the school committee. And the policy reads, "A teacher cannot recommend that one of his or her," and again, this is the MASC, so they haven't, I guess, revisited this, "one of their own students get tutoring and then be paid to tutor that same student in a second job. A teacher may not tutor students who are currently in their class. Even if the teacher does not recommend that the current student receive private tutoring, the teacher should not tutor current students. Teachers and other public employees may not approach a student or the student's parents or guardians seeking private tutoring work. A teacher may provide tutoring when the relationship is initiated by the parents or guardians or a student, but if the student is, or in the future may be, under the teacher's authority, the teacher will need to provide a written disclosure. A teacher cannot use school resources such as classrooms or materials in connection with a private tutoring business. A public school employee cannot use a school or district website to advertise private tutoring services. Schools cannot send home brochures for a particular tutoring service with the children. Tutoring is not to be recommended for a student unless the appropriate teacher of the student involved is consulted and agrees that it will be of real help. If tutoring seems advisable, the principal may give the parents or guardians a list of persons who are willing to tutor. This list may include teachers, but not the student's teacher of the subject in which he or she is to be tutored. Tutoring for pay is not to be done in the school building." And this was also recommended by our law department to add this policy.
Yeah.
Or your
this
legal counsel.
Basically helps us know that that's a conflict of interest.
Correct. Next, we have policy GDA, support staff positions. This is an MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version. And pretty much this policy remains the same, and it's quite similar to, I think, a prior
Yeah.
couple of these are.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah.
These are like, this is just like verbiage, like
Yes.
updating it. Yeah, you're fine.
Next, we have GDB, support staff contracts and compensation plans. This is an MASC policy that has, I made the recommendations, but I made the updates, I'm sorry, to reflect its most recent version of MASC edits. However, I recommended omitting this, which was seconded by your legal counsel. Reason being, CBAs apply to these positions, and again, this is a pretty general language.
No, I agree with that.
Okay.
Sounds good?
Next, we have policy GDCC, support staff and family medical leave. We've actually already gone through this one. This one was on here twice. So the recommendation was to omit this one.
And we all agree.
I think we're starting to see all the policies twice now. All right, here we go. GDD, support staff, vacations and policies. So a few of these were just classified incorrectly, so they show up twice. So again, this is an MASC policy missing from Brockton Public Schools policies. The recommendation is to omit this policy because CBAs apply and contain this information.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
Sounds good?
Same goes for GDE, support staff recruiting and posting of vacancies, BPS specific. Recommendation to omit, CBAs apply and contain this information.
Agreed.
Okay. GDEA, civil service qualifications and requirements. Same idea, Brockton Public Schools specific, recommendation to omit. And this policy was actually, it's classified on your website, and I couldn't find a record of it anywhere. So it's simply a title at this point.
Wow.
Civil service is covered, though. I believe it was section B. We've already gone over civil service. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's
the
right
next
here.
one.
This is again, another. So you had it classified twice, once under GDEA, and then it was listed again under GDI, Civil Service Staff Probation. Brockton Public Schools specific, the recommendation by your legal counsel was to omit this policy.
Agreed.
Next, we have GDO, evaluation of support staff. This is an MASC policy. It's been updated to reflect its most recent version. Prior, the policy read, it is the policy of the Brockton School Committee that all employees will be evaluated on a regularly scheduled basis. The policy has gotten a little bit more robust. It now reads, a program of continuous observation and evaluation will be developed to find the right employees to fill vacancies, determine assignments and equitable workloads, and establish wage and salary policies that encourage employees to put forth their best practices. This evaluation will cover the major areas of the employee's responsibilities and their job descriptions. Each employee will be informed of the basis upon which they are to be evaluated in advance of evaluation. And this supports the prior policies that we've discussed.
That makes sense.
Next, we have GDP, support staff promotions. This is a Brockton Public Schools specific policy. The recommendation was to remove this policy and reclassify this as just a department goal or a mission that could be revisited annually.
Agreed.
Sounds good?
Next, we have GDQC. This is titled Retirement of Support Staff Members. This is an MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version. And it reads, all full-time non-instructional personnel are required to participate in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts retirement system. Periodically, the superintendent will present to the committee the names of support staff members who have indicated their intentions to retire. And from everything that I was able to gather, this is current practice.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Check.
Next, we have GDQD, suspension and dismissal of support staff members. This is an MASC policy that's missing from Brockton Public Schools policies. I wanted to include it just so that you could see it, but your legal counsel advised that we omit this policy. CBAs apply and contain applicable language.
Agreed.
And that wraps up section G. Lastly, we have section H, which is short and sweet. Section H is negotiations. I'll let you pull that one up. All three of these are MASC policies. The first one is HA, negotiations goals. No changes have been made to this policy and no changes are recommended. Would you like me to read it?
I don't think so.
No changes?
Yeah, I think you're
Nope.
good.
Okay. Next, we have HB, negotiations legal status. This is an MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version. And as you can see, there's just three, very small changes. We've removed the words Chapter 150E of the, and it just simply states, subject to Massachusetts general laws now.
Oh, that looks good.
Okay. And lastly, again, HF School Committee Negotiating Agents. This is also an MASC policy that's been updated to reflect its most recent version, and this was more or less just language updates.
Oh, the they's in there.
That's right. We got this one right.
No, you're fine, you're fine. This
And
looks
that-
good.
And that's it, and that wraps up G and H. Any questions?
No, this looks good, and it all makes sense, and I love the fact that legal had a chance to look at it first.
There you go. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alyssa. And that's a lot of work, and thank you.
No problem.
We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
You do a great job presenting it,
Thank you.
so thank you.
All right.
Okay, do we have any other business? I don't
No.
think so for policy manual. I don't think, she always lets us know when the next updates are available, and we will be looking for those.
I would expect I and K, we are just waiting for them to come back from legal, and then as soon
right.
as we have them, we're ready to schedule another presentation.
All right, sounds good, just let us know.
Yeah.
And any of our members have any other questions for Alyssa?
No, this was great.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
so could we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
And the meeting is adjourned. I don't have the gavel.
all in
Do all in
favor?
favor.